As an atheist, I don't believe in any gods or goddesses. However, I find the claim of the existence of the Abrahamic God particularly unbelievable, mostly because he's claimed to be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, all at the same time. For something to be all three of those things just doesn't seem logical. It seems like there are too many contradictions, especially with the world being the way it is and the way that the religion is set up. There are simply too many contradictions based on those three things, and I think the problem is that when people were making up their God, probably in the interest of making that God greater than any gods before him, that they just made him far too powerful. It seems like the level of power that the God was injected with when he was created was more so to scare people than it was to make sense. The concept of God's omnipotence alone is self-contradictory. Can God make a boulder so large that even God can't lift it? Of course, that's a contradiction, because there is no such thing as someone being all-powerful. And in the scripture itself, it takes God 6 days to create the universe, and he rests on the seventh day. Now, I've heard it argued that he rested so that it would set an example for us. That's what they told me in my church service. But why did it take him 6 days to create the universe in the first place? That would suggest that there are limitations to God's power, as he couldn't do it in 5 days, unless there's a specific purpose that he took 6 days. Why would he do that? Why wouldn't anything that he willed to happen just happen? Why, instead of saying, let there be light, and then there being light, why wouldn't he just say, let there be a universe, and then there was a universe? Because the concept of omnipotence is not present in that part of the story, as it is in many other parts of the story. Another problem with God's omnipotence and omnipresence and omniscience is that he doesn't have any need to test people, as we're so often told that life is. Life is a test to see if we deserve to get into heaven, to see if we'll behave the way that we need to in order to reach that promised land in the sky. However, if God knows everything about every one of his creations, then he already knows if we're worthy. And if he's the all-powerful one that created us, wouldn't it be his fault if we weren't created well enough to deserve to get into heaven? There's all this free will argument, but it really doesn't matter if he had created us the way he wanted us to be in the first place. It was his job. If we were created against our will, then why can't we be created the way he wanted us to be against our will? I don't remember signing up to be created. Anyway, God knows, if he's all-knowing, then he knows exactly what level of proof we need in order to believe in him. He knows exactly what we need to know in order to be convinced of his existence, and he's still given us no real explanation for why the one thing that he needs in order for us to get into heaven is enough blind faith without proof of his existence, which just doesn't make sense given that he apparently gave us these logical, abstractly thinking brains. Now, back to the omnipotence part. If it was to take anything beyond faith, if we was to take any one thing just to prove that he exists, if that's the one thing he wants is for us to believe he exists, it would be very easy for him to supply that proof, being that he is omnipresent and omnipotent according to the Bible. So if he was to be asked to perform any number of tests, for example, God, here is this pen, this ink pen. Please, if you are real, if you are there, please just turn this pen into a rock. That would be of no consequence whatsoever to that God. It would be of no inconvenience at all for him to supply that simple request. Boom, this pen turns into a rock, we automatically believe he's here, or any number of other tests. For example, manifesting and proving to us that he exists. That would not be difficult for an omnipresent, omnipotent being. It wouldn't take any time from him or effort whatsoever because he's apparently all-powerful. Now, theists, of course, will argue that God is not going to perform tricks for us or do whatever we ask because we are not the ones who control him. He is the one in control of us. But, as I've said, it would take no effort whatsoever for him to prove his existence to us. And we also hear that theists will say, oh, well, God doesn't have to prove himself to you. You need to just believe in him because he is the one that created you. Well, in order for us to believe that, we need to have some kind of proof anyway. And if it would take him no effort whatsoever to provide that proof, and he knows exactly how much evidence we need before we can be convinced of that proof, then he cannot be surprised if he fails to provide us the proof he knows we need, or at least the level of evidence we need to be convinced when we don't believe and he's failed to give it to us. He needs to be able to supply the amount of proof that he created us with the skepticism to need before he can blame us for not believing in him. So if he would have been designed more like one of the Greek gods or the Roman gods, where he had limitations and wasn't given the same amount of all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present status, I personally would find it a little bit easier to believe in him.